Hello everybody and welcome to my brand new channel all about aviation. I've been an enthusiast of aircraft for more years than I care to remember. Everything to do with aviation, space, on the ground, in the air, that's my thing. And I wanted to create this channel to explore and share some of the things that I like to look at and experience with you. One of the things that I want to do is a series of videos on some of the aircraft that have influenced me over the years, and particularly the history of them. Now, the first one I want to have a look at is the de Havilland Chipmunk. Now, this holds a very special place in my heart. When I was a child, well, in my early teens, in fact, I was a member of the Air Training Corps at a local squadron 438 in Margate, which no longer exists. And they used to take us flying on Sundays up to the local air experience flight up at the former RAF Manston in Kent. And one of my fondest memories, apart from strapping on that parachute which made you hunch over and walk out to the aircraft, was the Jump Jump Johnny training video, which we used to call it. It was a safety video, all to do with all safety aspects of the aircraft. They made you sit through every single time you went up, and they engraved it in you so much some 30 years later. I could get in that cockpit of that aircraft and I would remember it all. Now, the de Havilland Chipmunk, or to give it its full name, the de Havilland Canada DHC-1 Chipmunk, is a tandem two-seat single-engine primary trainer aircraft. It was designed and developed by Canadian aircraft manufacturer de Havilland Canada. It was developed shortly after the Second World War and was sold in fairly large numbers during the immediate post-war years, and it typically was employed as a replacement for the ageing de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane, which was used as a trainer for several years beforehand. The Chipmunk was the first post-war aviation project conducted by de Havilland Canada. It performed its maiden flight on the 22nd of May 1946. That actually surprised me, that date, when I was looking into it, and it was introduced to operational service the same year. During the late 1940s and 1950s, the Chipmunk was procured in large numbers by military services all over the world, such as the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Air Force, and several other nations' air forces as well, where it is often utilised as their standard primary trainer aircraft. This type was produced under licence by de Havilland in the United Kingdom, who would produce the vast majority of Chipmunks, as well as OGMA in Portugal. The type was slowly phased out of service beginning in the late 1950s, although in the ab initio elementary training role. This did not happen in the Royal Air Force until 1996, when it was replaced by the Scottish Aviation Bulldog. As I said, I was in the Air Training Corps sometime around the early 90s, and I have very fond memories of that aircraft. Many Chipmunks, they've been in military use. They were all sold to civilians, either to private owners or to companies, where they were typically used for a variety of purposes, often involving the type's excellent flying characteristics and its capability for aerobatic manoeuvres. More than 70 years after the type having first entered service, hundreds of Chipmunks remain airworthy and are still in operation to this day all around the world. The Portuguese Air Force is still operating 6 Chipmunks, which serve with Squadron 802 as of 2018. And as the name would entail, the Chipmunk is actually named after the small rodent of the same name. Now, the origins of the Chipmunk, immediately following the conclusion of the Second World War, there was a desire within the Canadian aviation circles to take advantage during the peace years of the recently expanded aircraft manufacturing industry, which had been rapidly built up in Canada. Out of this desire, it was decided to embark on developing aircraft which would replace designs rendered obsolete by the rapid advances made during the war in the aviation field. One company, de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited, was interested in developing its own aircraft designs and chose to focus on producing a contemporary aircraft for pilot training, specifically intending for the Envision type to serve as a successor to the de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane trainer, which had been produced in the thousands before and during the Second World War and saw military service with a number of nations. A Polish pre-war engineer served as the principal designer and led the design team in the development of this new aircraft, which became known as the Chipmunk. He designed a cantilever monoplane that incorporated numerous advances over typical trainer aircraft then in widespread service. These included an enclosed cockpit complete with a rear sliding canopy and various aerodynamic features to manage the aircraft's flight performance. Strakes were fitted to deter spin conditions, and stall brake strips along the inboard leading edges of the wing ensured that the stall would originate in this position as opposed to the outboard section. The Chipmunk would become the first indigenous aircraft to be produced by de Havilland, Canada. The Chipmunk prototype first flew on the 22nd of May 1946. Its designation was CFDIO-X, and it was flown out of Downsview, Toronto in Canada. It was piloted by Matt Fillingham, who had been seconded from the parent de Havilland company. The prototype was powered by a 145 horsepower de Havilland Gypsy Major 1C air-cooled reciprocating engine. This was replaced on the production version of the Chipmunk by a 145 horsepower inline de Havilland Gypsy Major 8 engine. De Havilland Canada constructed the type at its factory in Downsview, where it produced 217 Chipmunks. During the 1940s and 1950s, the final example of which had been completed during 1956. In addition, 1,000 Chipmunks were produced under license in the United Kingdom by British aircraft manufacturer de Havilland. Manufacturing was initially performed at the company's facility at Hatfield Aerodrome in Hertfordshire. It was later decided to transfer production to another of its plants located at Havilland Aerodrome, Broughton, near Chester. A further 66 Chipmunks were licensed, manufactured by OGMA at Alvercia from 1955 to 1961 for use in the Portuguese Air Force. Both British-built and early Canadian-built Chipmunks are notably different from the later Canadian-built RCAF Lebanese versions. The later Canadian-built aircraft were fitted with a bubble canopy, which replaced the multi-panelled sliding canopy. Those are the ones I remember from the Air Cadet days. That had been used upon early Canadian-produced Chipmunks, along with all the Portuguese and British-built aircraft. On the early build canopy, the rearmost panels intentionally bulged in order to provide the instructor's position with superior visibility. British-built Chipmunks also differed by a number of adjustments to suit the express preferences of the Royal Air Force. These included the positioning of the undercarriage legs, anti-spin strakes, landing lights and all-round stressed airframe. At one point, work was being conducted on a derivative of the Chipmunk, which featured an extensive cabin modification to accommodate a side-by-side seating arrangement. The aircraft, which was referred to as DHC-2, ultimately remained unbuilt. The DHC-2 designation was subsequently reallocated to the company's next product, the DHC-2 Beaver. The de Havilland Canada DHC-1 Chipmunk is a two-seat single-engine aircraft that's been heavily used as a primary trainer. The basic configuration of the aircraft included a low-mounted wing and a two-place tandem cockpit, which was fitted with a clear perspex canopy, and it covered the pilot and the student and provided all-round visibility, which was very good. The Chipmunk uses a conventional tailwheel landing gear arrangement and is fitted with fabric-covered flight control services. The wing is also fabric-covered aft of the spar. In terms of handling, the Chipmunk exhibited a gentle and responsive flight attitude. Early production aircraft were only semi-aerobatic, while later production models were almost all fully aerobatic. The structure of the Chipmunk makes heavy use of metal, the majority of the airframe being composed of a stress-skinned alloy. This allowed the adoption of thinner wings and consequently provided for increased performance, as well as greater degree of durability. Numerous features were incorporated so that the type could better perform as a trainer, including hand-operated single-slot wing flaps, anti-spin strakes, disc brakes on the wheeled undercarriage, a thin propeller composed of a solid, lightweight alloy, the adoption of an engine-driven vacuum pump in place of the external venturi tubes to power cockpit instrumentation, electric and Kaufman cartridge engine starters as alternative options, cockpit lighting, onboard radio system, and an external identification light underneath the starboard wing. In civilian service, individual aircraft would often be modified. Examples of these adaptations include extensive modifications that enabled it to perform competitive aerobatics, for which aircraft are often re-engined and fitted with constant speed propellers and inverted fuel systems. Larger numbers of Chipmunks have been tasked as dedicated glider tows. It has become commonplace for Chipmunks to be re-engined, typically using the 180 horsepower Lyoming 0360. Its operational history covered many countries. It was used in the United Kingdom by the Royal Air Force as its primary trainer for a great many years. It was one of the operators that took notice of the new Canadian trainer pretty quickly and encouraged its formal evaluation with an eye towards procuring it. A total of 3 Chipmunk aircraft were transported to the United Kingdom, where they underwent an evaluation. Based upon this favourable evaluation, the British Air Ministry proceeded to formulate and release Air Ministry specification T848 around the type as a replacement for the de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane then in use. The specification was also contested by the rival Fairy Primer, which lost out to the Chipmunk and ultimately didn't enter production. In Canada, in 1948, the RCAF accepted its first DHC-1 Chipmunk trainers, having received the first batch of a production run of 217 Chipmunks that would be manufactured in Canada. The Chipmunk was the first Canadian-designed aircraft to be made abroad under licence, and as such, the majority of the homegrown production were destined for the RCAF. However, Canadian-built Chipmunks were also delivered to some overseas customers as well, including Egypt, Lebanon and Thailand. In Portugal, the Portuguese Air Force received its first Chipmunk Mark 20 in 1951, being delivered to the Military Aeronautical School in Sinitra. It was the first of an eventual 76 that would be delivered, replacing its almost 2 decades old de Havilland Tiger Moths. Its first 10 were constructed in the United Kingdom, while the other 66 were licensed, built by OGMA in Portugal. The Chipmunks would fly with the Elementary Flying Training Squadron. In other countries, from the 1950s, the Chipmunk became a popular civilian aircraft, having been used for various roles such as pilot training, aerobatics and even crop spraying. The majority of the civilian aircraft are ex-military and have been resold and frequently modernised. It also a mechanically sound aircraft, and consequently many ex-RCAF Chipmunks have since remained operational for decades with private owners and operators all around the world. By 2001, several hundred Chipmunks were still operational in private service. There's been many variants over the years, from the original Canadian-built Chipmunk and British-built Chipmunk, at least half a dozen or so. Even Portuguese-built Chipmunks, there was another variant of them. In civilian circles, there's been several variants and conversions as well. There's the Macefield variant, the Super Chipmunk, the Turbo Chipmunk, Super Monk, and the Skull Super Chipmunk, all variants of the same aircraft, and very, very wide use, and I still see, even today in 2022, examples of this wonderful aircraft still flying. There you go, folks. Anything that you want to ask, or any experience you've had of the Chipmunk yourself, either in service, the cadets or other, please leave a comment below. It would be great to hear from you and start building this community. Also, could I ask a favour that you subscribe to the channel, share this video and hit the like button, because that will help us grow. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye for now.